And it's a very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel and a very special guest today, Tim Costello, well known for his 13 years of being the CEO of World Vision, but more importantly, as far as we're concerned today, that is that he is...
Did the host just go?
Yes, I think we've lost Mark.
You might have to introduce yourself, Tim.
Well, I've done that before.
Well, let me step in.
John,
Tim,
you take over.
John Callahan. Tim, thanks for coming in. Yeah, as Mark was saying, 13 years as CEO of World Vision Australia. Seriously, if I went through your CV, the whole show would disappear. It's quite extraordinary. But relevantly for today, you were or are the spokesperson for the Interchurch Gambling Task Force, member of the National Advisory Body on Gambling, member of the Alcohol Education and Rehabilitation Foundation, and the author of a book, Wanna Bet, clearly on the topic today. Tim, it's something that we on this program have been discussing for some time. It's a matter of increasing concern for us and for people who follow our show, is gambling in sport in Australia. I just wanted to start us off, Tim, by giving us a thumbnail sketch of the current proliferation of gambling in sport in Australia, and why do you think it creates a problem?
Yeah, so gambling in sports such as greyhounds or horse races has existed since Adam was a boy. In fact, you wouldn't have a greyhound race or a horse race without gambling. So that has always been with us, and the TAB, which was largely attracting men, blokes would go to the TAB. The TABs were built originally not to encourage you to stop and have a drink or have a meal. They weren't even to have chairs in the TAB. The idea was to make it go in quickly, lay your bet, get out, don't encourage it too much. What then profoundly shifted was pokies, particularly coming to Victoria in 1992, going to clubs and pubs. Suddenly, women who were less than 7% of the problem gambling community, when it was just horses and greyhounds, jumped to over 50% of the problem gamblers, from 7% to 50%. And why is that really worrying? Because it's women who pay the mortgage, pay the rent, do the shopping, clothe the kids. So when they get addicted, that's really problematic. What then happened was also this explosion with other sports. So not just greyhounds and horses, but with cricket, with league, with AFL. Suddenly our kids' heroes, football stars, cricket stars, were literally turned into dogs or horses to bet on. You know the odds. Kids talk about the odds. They know the logos. They know the jingles of the sports betting companies. This is a profound shift that has occurred very, very rapidly, and that's what's happened.
To the point, I'm told that if a child goes to a football match these days, that getting to the match, being at the match and getting home, on average, they'll see 58 sporting ads. Now, that's the sort of problem you're talking about, I presume, Tim?
Yeah, look, this is mainstreaming and normalising an adult product. You'll often hear people who defend this, the sports betting companies say, well, it's legal. Yeah, well, so's alcohol, but you can't have alcohol ads during the 7 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news on TV, because it's not allowed. Even more, cigarettes are legal, but you wouldn't ever advertise them. In some states, brothels are legal. You wouldn't ever have an adult product in the face of kids. How is it possible that sports betting ads, an adult product, can be on the news, on MasterChef, on the block, in all the family friendly viewing times? How is that possible? This is profound failure by government and capture by the sports betting industry.
Paul Deligan, I do the rugby league segment. I think at one period, Tom Waterhouse was in the top 3 spenders on advertising in the country. and a friend of mine might have written some of his material because he doesn't know his rugby league that well. What it's been replaced by now, it seems every single ad break, there's a cross-bet ad, or I almost feel for the ad makers, for people like Bluebet, because it's the same ad over and over and over. I don't mind a punt, and I love my rugby league, but those ads are just infuriatingly too repetitive.
Yep, and you're absolutely right to raise the question of massive saturation. They don't spend that money because it doesn't work. People say, oh, yeah, but the ads are all the same and, et cetera, et cetera. And the ads actually work. The ads, the spending on sports betting has just massively exploded, particularly in COVID period, because they work. And the way they say now, the groups of men, bet with your mates. We are bringing community to you. Mateship, friendship, that's brought to you now by Sportsbet and Bet365. The culture has been captured. Australians always like the punt, but it was not ever like this.
I mean, yesterday there was an ad, full-page ad from Sportsbet congratulating Australia on Victoria on 90% vaccination. It wasn't any link to punting. It wasn't any link to sports. It was a betting company congratulating the state on reaching a milestone. That's how ubiquitous it seems to be.
So the story behind this is pretty dark. Those are mainly foreign-owned sports betting companies. They all registered in the Northern Territory. Why the Northern Territory? Because there they were paying hardly any tax, but that was still attractive for a Northern Territory. And they were pumping out of the Northern Territory and couldn't be regulated, their ads right across the whole country. Northern Territory regulation. Northern Territory is really just the size of a local government council, and its governance is the calibre of a local government council. So these foreign-owned, massive sports betting companies got their foothold in through the Northern Territory and have now gone so upstream, they virtually own the sport. So when we talk to SBS about getting the sports betting ads off free to air at SBS, and the CEO of SBS, the chair, they all want to do that. They literally say, but actually the sports betting companies that bring the soccer, the world soccer, will take their streaming rights away from SBS. We now can't even control what we show. If we stop the ads, sports betting ads, we would lose the soccer, which is one of our highest rating. So suddenly you've got this dark story of something starting in Northern Territory, which has become so powerful, it virtually now owns the sports.
Tim, with the AFL, obviously living in Victoria is our predominant sport. Are the clubs actually trying to lead the way for the AFL, or with many of the clubs now getting out of one pokies? I'm not sure many of them accept sponsorship from betting companies they used to, whereas the AFL, it's still a significant carrot to them.
Yeah. So when I went and visited with Nick Xenophon Gill-McLachlan, CEO of the AFL, he was very, very happy for clubs to get out of pokies. As soon as we raised sports betting, he turned thunderous in his attitudes. Look, the AFL clubs have really led the way. When Collingwood got out of their pokies, Eddie Maguire rang me. He said, "You've been a pain in the ass, Tim, but we've done the right thing. It cost us some money, but it feels good." Eddie said, it feels like a spiritual experience, Tim. Now, you decide between Eddie and the spiritual experiences, but Geelong have done it, the Bulldogs have done it, Melbourne have done it. They have led the way. What has the AFL done with its sports betting? It has only drilled down even further. And what I was saying about soccer before, I think is now becoming true, that the AFL actually may not really own the brand anymore. I think Bet365 and the sports betting companies behind the AFL may actually, if we really drilled in, may actually have some serious equity in owning the brand. That's how bad it's got.
I was going to say, I think a fine example of how much money is involved. There was an ad once, Samuel L. Jackson on a spaceship. Now, that wouldn't have been cheap to make, and I don't know why that would make more sense. I'm not going to rush out and open a betting account because Reservoir Dogs' top man's on a spaceship, but that shows you he wouldn't have done that for peanuts. That many, many millions just to get that bloke on a spaceship.
Yeah, the spend on the advertising is just gobsmacking. It is absolutely gobsmacking. It's up there beyond Harvey Norman. And this is because it is just so lucrative. Now, in Italy, they have banned all gambling and advertising, banned it. In Britain, Ladbrokes were the sponsors for the FA Cup. They said, we don't like the fact that kids are being normalised mainstream into betting, and they broke the sponsorship deal with Ladbrokes. The AFL just drills in even further. And, if you read Mick Warner's book about the boys' club on the AFL, there's lots of devious stories there, but certainly gambling and the AFL and their sports betting relationships is nearly a total capture.
It's interesting that you say that as well, because even looking at the big freeze this year, there was betting advertisements everywhere, and then you had players like Daisy Pearce dressing up as Bluey and going into the big freeze and going through it all. But they're now tying these children's elements to betting companies as well. And it's gotten to the point where I think I read a statistic once where an 8-year-old who has been watching the footy his whole life or their whole life would have never been able to watch an AFL game that didn't have some sort of betting advertisement in it, which is shocking in itself, because I grew up with my dad betting on horses, all that sort of stuff, but it was never sort of forced on you. It was something that you knew was happening and it was there. But now kids don't have an option. They really, if they want to participate in watching sport and participate in that element of loving AFL or loving a lot of sports, they are forced to be exposed to it. So I'm really hoping that the AFL sort of changes their tune. Otherwise, the next generation of footy fans aren't going to love the game. They're going to love the odds, to steal the words out of someone else's mouth.
Yeah. Well, the AFL were going ballistic when the Eastern Woods and others were actually speaking out, saying, I will take lower player payments, actually just to see you break the sponsorship, because the AFL always say, well, the players, you can't speak out because, your payments will get affected if we lose betting sponsors. You've now got the state government with our taxes having a love the game, not the odds ads, where you have footballers and kids actually targeting sports betting companies while the AFL are captured by them and promoted. Of course, there was the AFL being judge, juror and prosecutor when Jaden Stevenson had a bet. Now, where would he have got that idea to have a bet? Oh, might it have been playing at the MCG where the AFL were encouraging it to have a bet with their sponsorship. This has become absolutely so interpenetrated with so many conflicts of interest that the AFL have lost their way morally. They are in a moral mess over these issues.
Geldy, you wanted to ask?
Yeah. Tim, going back, apart from Sarah, a few of us have got a few years vintage on it. The TAB was introduced to get away from SP bookmaking and to come into 15% of all turnover would go into hospitals to improve the thing. Do you think the governments have gone too far by letting these individuals, as you said, international betting companies, come into Australia, come into Victoria and bet? And should the Victorian government ban these companies from betting in Victoria, because we don't get the same benefit from them as Victorians as we do, say, from the TAB?
Yeah, no, the problem state governments have is that they can't stop it. This is a federal communications power in our constitution. The Northern Territory can only be pulled in by the feds. So state governments have been furious with these foreign-owned sports betting companies inundating our TVs, and them getting nothing. They found a way just recently to introduce a slight point of, what do they call it, point of consumption tax, to claw a little bit back from these sports betting companies. But this is the Feds. This is Minister Paul Fletcher, Minister for Communications. I can't even get a meeting with Paul Fletcher because the Feds completely captured the sports betting companies, are pretty handy with the political donations, it seems to me. So I am stopped by mothers in the street who are complete strangers to me, just outraged, saying my child is being targeted. I am outraged. What are you doing? I say, I'm trying my best. And then they say, but who do I write to? Is it, our state government? No, it's the federal minister, because state governments have had their hands tied on this.
Worry with children as well. Some might laugh on here. I couldn't fill out a TAB ticket till I was 30. My kids, one of them last night racked up $45 on Fortnite credit. So if they can access a game, which isn't betting, you better believe they could access a sports site. Even fantasy football now is linked to betting. I'm in an NFL fantasy football, and suddenly there's popped up a way to bet on it. So there'd be lots of kids in that fantasy football who could click on that link, and if they get their hands on a credit card, they could get hooked.
Yep, exactly. And we hear those stories. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Paul, just another one. And it comes down to responsibility. Yes, we all like a bet on this show, and we do have a bet. I punt on horses, but could go to the races and only have 3 or 4 bets. You were talking about mothers going to the pokies and sitting there for days, and we see those stories on the news. When does it become a personal responsibility where you can choose, if these services are all available, you don't have to use them? When does it become, I've got a problem, these people, it was too available for me? We go to the casino, but we go to the dining areas. May not even go into the gambling area because I think it's a bit down, it's pretty ordinary type of area. Where do you see the difference between personal responsibility and problem gambling?
Well, it's always both. Personal responsibility is always there, and absolutely no one can force you to do something. So you have to take personal responsibility, and it's equally state or federal responsibility. So when the states introduced pokies, they didn't just put pokies in casinos. They put pokies, which are built for addiction, in pubs and clubs. So Australia has 20% of the world's pokies, 75% of the world's pokies in pubs or clubs, meaning they are so accessible. You're planning just to go down the street to buy your milk and bread, and of course, there's a club and a pokies. The rest of the world said, no, that's irresponsible. That is so irresponsible because we know pokies are built for addiction, and people get addicted very quickly. The dopamine released when you sit in front of their machine hits the pleasure center of the brain with the force of cocaine when the jackpot lights go off. Now, extend that to sports betting. Absolutely, people have to be personally responsible, but when kids are groomed from a young age to actually only think in terms of their heroes, their team, and the sport, when kids notice going to the football, people are watching a different game. What you'll see with young men now, they're not watching the game for their team. They're watching a game for their bets. Who's going to kick the first goal? And they are literally watching a different game. Now, who's responsible for that? Governments that have allowed saturation sports betting ads. So it's never one or the other. The industry always likes to point the finger and say, oh, gamble responsibly. By the way, I'll tell you where that came from. Gamble responsibly came when New South Wales clubs went to the National Rifle Association in 2013 in America. And there they were taught, guns don't kill, only people kill. Never blame the gun. you blame the individual. They came back, sold to state governments, gamble responsibly. Pokies or gambling never hurts anyone. It's only people who are irresponsible. Blame the individual. So the shifting all onto individual responsibility has been really also pushed by this industry that's out of control.
Just going to say on the poker
what I was
machines, you
saying
might
about
know
that-
more
sorry,
what
Paul.
happened. There was,
Paul, if
I
I
guess
could
if you
just
call
add
it a
on to
test
that.
case. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, can I just add on to that?
Yeah.
What I do accept that there's a big glut of this gambling, but a lot of people can choose not to gamble on it. So I just think it's more a balance of government should stop it or ban it some way, the same as they did with cigarette advertising. But the person also, if I go to an RSL, I walk past the pokies machines. You don't have to stop there. So there's got to be, I agree, stop the advertising, but also don't say this person comes out and goes, I couldn't help it because they were there.
Now,
Yep, I
just
agree
on
with
that,
that.
Gelding, I wanted to chime in. There was a test case or a complaint, I think it was ACCC, with the poker machines. If you press $1 for a bet and you get 20 cents back, that's not a win. That's an 80% loss. And yet you still get the circus bells and whistles. And it was being pushed, and I probably can understand why it was hijacked. That isn't a win, and that is misleading and deceptive because everyone wants circus noises and lights and bells. You've just lost 80% of your investment. And that is misleading and deceptive. And that inquiry or complaint went nowhere. And you can probably tell us why.
Sarah.
Yeah, no, that's,
Hang on,
Hang
hang on. Let Tim answer that question.
Oh yeah, you go.
we losses disguised as wins is one of the deceptive features of all the machines. The other one is where you, in the nanosecond you push the button, you've won or lost with a poker machine. But up will come first pyramid, second, third. By the fifth pyramid, it's always just one above or one below the line. It's called a near miss. And the sounds will go off. In fact, it's rigged. In the nanosecond you push the button, you won or lost. The near miss is to release the dopamine. So what we now know is it is designed by the best psychologists, near misses or losses disguised as wins, to release the dopamine and get you addicted.
Sarah.
Yeah, I guess growing up with this sort of sports betting information has been a bit of a different experience for my generation. Personally, I've never actually placed a bet on any sort of sports matches or using tab or anything, but I did. My first job after I turned 18 was as a pokies attendant at the local pub, and even just being involved in the culture but from a step away, not actually participating in it, it's an eye-opening experience in itself, because a lot of these people that are going out there and gambling, they're not doing it as any sort of enjoyable activity. Most of them, it's almost just routine. It's built into what they're doing now, and it's something that they can't change. And the flashy lights, it brings people in. But I also remember growing up, and if I was going to the pub for dinner with my family or something, or you're having like your netball presentation night there, you see the flashy lights. And as a kid, you want to go in and you want to participate and you want to do all the circus stuff, because that's the sort of stuff that kids are really attracted to. I definitely do not want advertisements or any sort of gambling advertisements influencing my kids when they're growing up or when I have kids. But it feels like there needs to be a bit of a further step than just saying no more advertisements, because they're selling it very well. And it's now part of Australian culture that is going to be a very, very big thing to try and fix or remove, because it's now incorporated into how we speak. We say, oh, what are the odds that you'll do this, or you want to bet, you want to do blah, 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 blah. It's just a part of how we speak now. And while getting rid of the ads is one thing, I think the work that you're doing and actually trying to reverse that sort of change and help build the next generation to be more positively influenced by sport rather than the act of betting is of the same importance, if not more, trying to actually build a healthy relationship with sport and young people.
Yep, thank you. Well, what's really interesting, Sarah, is that the pokies world, sports betting probably do it too, would say because of the monies we put back into sports, we really are helping sports and helping the community. What we know now, the figures have come out, is that in Western Australia, where there's no pokies outside Burswood Casino, none in suburbs, none in country towns, unlike New South Wales and Victoria, there is higher sporting participation and community participation than the pokies states. This idea that you actually have to have pokies to really encourage sports and fund it is a complete lie. It's just allowed the pokies really to capture. And what you've said is really true, Sarah. What we know is that if America's blind spot is guns, the rest of the world looks at them and goes, they're nuts. The rest of the world looks at Australia and says, they're nuts, their blind spot is gambling. We have the greatest gambling losses per head of any nation in the world, per capita, and they are 40% higher than the nation that comes second.
Tim, just two questions from me. First of all, we're talking about normalising gambling. I'm surprised that the Commonwealth government allows advertisements to surreptitiously be introduced into programming. An example, I might be watching AFL 360, it'll get towards the end of the program, and then if I'm not particularly paying attention, I won't notice that they've thrown to two former footballers who are also sitting behind a desk, which looks very much like the show. But before I know it, I'm being regaled with who looks a good bet for Saturday, who might kick the first goal. And I'm thinking, well, it's almost been introduced as part of the program. Surely that can't be good for society if that's happening.
Totally. Look, what's going on is extraordinary. I'm old enough to remember how we would have a rating on TV, AO, adults only, and it would be sex or violence. Well, what we're now doing is in family-friendly times pushing adult products onto kids. Now, here's a government that had to have a royal commission rightfully into the institutional abuse, child abuse of kids, and they are allowing the grooming of kids with an adult product. I think it's just completely wrong, and I intend at the next federal election, whether it's March or May, to be making this a political issue. And I think there'll be a lot of parents going, count me in. We want this advertising banned. This has to stop.
Tim, you mentioned that you're a pain in the neck. You still there, Tim?
Yep, I am. Sorry.
Yeah, you're a pain in the neck or some other part of the anatomy to Collingwood. You're clearly a pain in the neck to the AFL. The government, I see, have got $5 billion of revenue tied up in gambling revenue. Where do you see, apart from you guys holding back the tide, where do you see the real opposition to this coming from?
I think it's coming from mums and dads. I think most of them are saying, okay, I don't really play the pokies, and it is terrible that we have 20% of the world's pokies, but I don't play them, and actually less than 20% of the population even play the pokies. So that's a bit hidden. But when it comes to the ads that your kids are seeing, that's a different story. The only job an adult really has is to protect children. That's really the only sole, moral, responsible job for an adult. And here's the government allowing these greedy foreign-owned companies to actually target our kids. That's where the opposition will come from, just mums and dads.
So the government is in dereliction of its duty to children, Tim, without pointing on it.
It's failing in its duty to children. It can, now look back and say, well, we called a royal commission into institutional child abuse and apologies, whilst under its nose, certain, call them shaping of abusive attitudes that will flower into addictions are happening with kids who should be protected.
Cooter, did you have a question before we finish up?
No, I don't. I think we've really gone to some good places today.
Okay, perhaps just finish on this one, Tim. You mentioned political donations. How long before we see the government prevent gambling companies from making political donations?
It should be after the Crown Royal Royal Commission. That should have been done by now. It's extraordinary, isn't it, that here is government and the regulator allowing Crown to enable organised crime, and they're happily taking massive donations, both sides of politics, from what is a money laundering outfit. That's what Crown Casino is. It should be treated like property developers in New South Wales. No should ever come from gambling companies, and that's another thing we're advocating.
Okay, Tim, look, thanks very much for spending time with us today. We really appreciate it. It's a very hot topic, and one that we always try and talk about and bring to the public's attention. And hopefully your words today will be passed on, and it will create a bit of a groundswell so that some of the worst things that we see with gambling are cut out.
A delight to be with you all. Go well.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tim.
Tim.
Yeah. No worries. Good to see you. Thanks.
All right.
Professor, we actually didn't mention a name there. We didn't ask him about the Hawthorn president and former leader of Beyond Blue. Probably a wise thing, I would think.
Professor
Gelding?
Just a quick question for you. Maybe you guys can help. And it's one I certainly didn't want to bring up while Tim was on the line and that. I'm trying to get the timelines together. Now, Tim's brother is very influential in the Liberal Party and was, the treasurer of the company. Now, was that around about the same time that these companies seem to come to Australia? Can anyone kind of, John, Cooter, Paul, yourself, Professor Sarah, was that round about the same timeline? Was Tim's brother...
We might be meeting him for lunch. We might be able to get his brother on.
In any event, Gelding, I'm not my brother's keeper. Their lives could not have been followed more differently after they left the cot, it seems to me. And if you look at the history of Tim Costello, I didn't read his CV. One of the things that stood out, apart from the fact he's one of Australia's national living treasures, he started his own law firm as a young solicitor in a Baptist church in St Kilda.
Yeah,
this guy's grassroots.
Definitely.
He's more of our
I'm just saying,
people that we talk to.
As you said, he did mention he's having trouble seeing the communications minister of the Liberal Party, at the moment. If anyone's got the contacts into the Liberal Party, it's certainly his family. And I'm just trying to figure out the timeline of when they all kind of came in. It was interesting. And I thought better of asking that on it.
I was going to say it would have been quite a whiteboard topic there if you just threw that in. Was it your brother that enabled the Trojan horse to arrive? That would have been quite a zinger.
Yeah, timelines are always very interesting when you put them up against events and things like that. Yeah.
So just to add as a postscript to all this, it's illegal to have gambling advertising during children's programming, and there's a carve out for sport. Now that's just when he says he can't talk to Paul Fletcher, that's because he's going to embarrass him by asking these obvious questions to him about why they, the federal government, are allowing this stuff to happen.
You could ask. I mean, the idea of having advertising on television for poker machines would seem ludicrous. But why is that sort of gambling any different to sports gambling? They both have the potential to be addictive and to encourage problem gamblers and indoctrinate children. We don't see pokey ads.
No. All right. Might leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. The next topic for discussion is equally as fraught. Tim Payne appointed captain of the Australian Test side in early 2018 during Australia's tour of South Africa. But what we now know is that there were some rather risque texts sent by him in November 2017, some 4 months before he was appointed, there was an investigation into those texts. What the current chair of Cricket Australia says is that if this regime had have been in when that investigation was undertaken, he would have been out as captain once it had been reported in. Gelding, I might go to you as our cricket commentator. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, what a story. Weeks before the Ashes series, events occurring 4 years ago. There is an investigation done. The investigation says, yes, probably not appropriate, and we'll all say what he did is not appropriate. Does that affect the code of conduct that was available at the time? Cricket Australia at the time said no. I think I've been professor. My views of Cricket Australia in that time was it was an absolute basket case. So that's fine. Easy for a board to come out now and say if we'd have been in, we would have gunned him. I don't know, were they coming off the controversy in South Africa? I'm not too sure. As I text to you, Professor, before we got off air, is he a serial murderer? 9 pages in the local paper today are committed to this texting incident in 2017. He has resigned as captain, still said he's available to play if required. He's done the wrong thing. In his personal life, he will have to deal with that. And it seems from reading all these pages, his wife and him have dealt with it, but obviously it's resurfaced again now. Is there other motives involved, Professor? Why is this brought up now? I know
well, I just wanted to suggest the reason why they wouldn't have wanted it made public when it happened is because they were trying to restore their image after the sandpaper gate. But what I was most interested in reading today is that Payne himself said Justin Langer was very supportive of him continuing on as captain, which I found very interesting. Not as a player, our national coach was telling him to stay on as captain knowing this scandal, which I find that very interesting.
Well, he was appointed captain.
No, but he wants him to stay on knowing what's happened and knowing this incident. Langer has insisted that he stay on as captain, but Payne said, no, I have to.
Let's put it in perspective. This isn't an event that just happened. This is an event that's happened 4 years ago, investigated. He's also dealt with it in his private life. There was a push about 6 months ago, if you remember, to get rid of him as captain. Then all of a sudden that was defeated and all that, and he retained the job. Doesn't the timing mean anything 3 weeks before an Ashes series? As I've said to Professor, I don't know if you believe in conspiracy theories, Indian cricket controls world cricket. New South Wales cricket controls Australian cricket. You have a look at it. Apart from Payne, the last non-New South Wales captain of Australia was Greg Chappell. Why is it that, and the push seems to be for Patrick Cummins, who bowls for New South Wales, to be captain of Australia? I don't know. I just think the timing, again, as we talk about timelines, this has been dealt with in 2017, put to bed, is raised 4 years later. And if someone's not trying to do a hatchet job on him, I don't know, because very rarely do you see a story with nine pages of coverage in the one thing. AFL football hardly gets 9 pages. As I said to Professor, there's 8 race meetings in Victoria today, and the racing guide's only 8 pages. and that's covering 8 race meetings in Victoria. It just seems, I think, and it's only my opinion.
Could one of the
someone
candidates
seems to
for
be
your
doing a
conspiracy
hatchet
theory
job on
be
him.
maybe the Barmy Army looking for some material?
Kudo.
Well,
I'm happy to wait for Paul to ask his question.
My point I was trying to make is our national coach, as of now, is not on the same page as our former captain who's resigned. That's what the point I'm trying to make. So it's just, I find it astounding that Justin Langer insisted that he stay on and wasn't on board with the clear, correct decision that our captain should not be engaged in such conduct.
do you see another captain out there, Paul?
Doesn't matter.
Cummins, of course, clean skin. It doesn't matter whether he's from the moon. I don't think his state is relevant. He is perfectly aligned with Steve Smith as a deputy who's been there before. You can't put Steve Smith back in after Sandpaper Gate, but as a deputy, I think he'll assist with some old school know-how. Cummins, I think, perfectly placed. And as Jeff Lawson said, the idea that a bowler can't be a captain is nonsense.
No, I'm not disagreeing. A bowler can be captain, but when did Pat Cummins last captain a team?
Well, he's about to be.
Isn't
So,
Well, he's not even New South Wales.
Can I perhaps suggest that looking to see who the next captain is not the appropriate place to start? It's as to whether Payne A should have been appointed captain in the first place. B, whether once this becomes a public, comes out into the public domain, whether it's okay for him to remain as captain, and whether Cricket Australia have now acted in the correct way. Whether Cummins, who's the next captain doesn't matter.
Two things on that, Professor.
Yep.
Right. Cricket Australia appointed him captain after the event, and they knew about it. Okay, right or wrong, they appointed him. He has been captain since 2018 and continued through all these series. Now he's resigned as captain, so he's pulled out as captain. Cricket Australia didn't sack him; he's resigned as captain. A flurry of me. It just seems Cricket Australia became aware of this again. They said a couple of weeks ago when it was brought to their attention. Well, they had an investigation 4 years ago. They've known about it for that long. Cricket Australia, the current board, have known about it since they've been in power. Didn't do anything about it then. All of a sudden, I don't know. It just, timing to me just seems, and again, we're not saying it's the right thing to do. And he's taken the thing of stepping down, right? After being cleared by Cricket Australia, saying there was no wrongdoing by the code of conduct. Well, they cleared him, right? Yeah. Not saying it's right or wrong, right? He's addressed it personally and things like that. Question I'm asking to you is, why is it brought up 3 weeks before a series?
I'll tell you why, Kelly. It's pretty obvious. This story has not been under the radar. This story apparently has been known to all the cricket journos and everybody in cricket for the last 4 years. What's happened is that News, most likely the Herald Sun or one of those organisations, has decided this is a great time to raise it, and so the indications are they're going to raise it. So Cricket Australia is trying to get ahead of it, and say now we'll raise it and deal with it now. That they allegedly dealt with it 4 years ago, they clearly didn't, and that's the problem, which is now coming back to bite them. How they could ever think that a sexting scandal in the year 2021 is going to avoid the media. They have got, they're in Gaga La La land. Kuda, what do you reckon?
I just cannot believe that 4 years down the track that we're now discussing this. Why was it not dealt with appropriately at the time? 4 years ago, this was unacceptable, surely. Like, society would deem this to be unacceptable 4 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it is. And yet here we are discussing it in as you said, Gelding, before an Ashes series, I don't care when it is. Like what's happened 4 years ago should have been dealt with accordingly. The fact he was made Australian captain on the back
after it,
but on the back of Sandpaper Gate, really, Cricket Australia is a basket case in itself. The other thing with Tim Payne is that he, as you said, he's the one that's done all this. It's not Cricket Australia. They haven't told him that he's stepped down. They haven't suspended him. They haven't fined him. All they've done is accept his resignation and say, we'll now work through finding the next captain of Australian cricket. And 9 pages, wasn't it once mentioned that the Australian Test cricket captain was second to the Prime Minister in importance in Australia?
Yeah.
No surprise.
What I found funny was Shane Warne's called for his resignation over texting.
Why are they going? Are we listening to Shane Warne?
No, I'm just saying there's 2 pages in the paper on Shane Warne's article, in which it says it's time to remove on the skipper.
And the other thing, Gelding, is that we're now at a stage where Australian cricket is all-encompassing. And we chatted before with Sarah the fact that the WBBL is playing 4 games a day at the moment. They're about to enter their final series. And the promotion of women's cricket is greater than it's ever been. And here we are with talking about the Australian Test captain.
I think we all agree Cricket Australia has been a basket case for a while.
Still
and
is.
Continues to be so.
Sarah, your thoughts?
No, it's disappointing, especially with the timing. I think it is, again, just comes down to journalists trying to pick their perfect time to try and get the most out of a story, especially in the lead up to an event such as the Ashes. And it's just, again, disappointing because it seems to always fall into times where it suits a journalist or it suits an organisation, but not when the time is actually right for the cricket community and then the greater Australian community. This is an issue I assume was dealt with adequately by Cricket Australia and then was dusted under the rug and hoped that it would never come to surface again. But how could you go off the back of an issue like Sandpaper Gate and think, oh, yeah, that was pretty bad. This other bad thing has also just happened, but no one's heard of it. That guy will be able to handle this coming off of this other bad thing. Like, would you not just bring someone that hasn't had that sort of past that the organisation could actually trust to maybe not make those decisions again? If I was running an organisation and I knew that Tim Payne had done something like that, I would not trust him with anything. I'd be keeping him close. I'd be watching him like an eagle. Because I could not trust him to then keep the name of Cricket Australia in good faith. And it currently isn't. It, as we've said before, the organisation is a shambles. It seems that every time something starts going their way, like the WBBL promotion, and there was a lot of nice buzz going into the Ashes about the Aussie team, and then something like this happens and it just completely blows it up. So,
Sarah,
again, yeah.
Spot on, Sarah. Spot on.
That's the issue of character in sport too, Sarah. I mean, and I think by the way, it's this should have been dealt with decisively back 4 years ago.
Definitely.
But doesn't it now show how important the good character is in sporting terms? So this is as Paul said, just about what Gelding said. It's the second highest job in Australia. So doesn't it now show that good character has to come along with sporting responsibility?
100%. And it comes down to, again, it's a sport and it's played on such this high elite level and people love it. But people love it because they're playing it at a community level and they're sharing that sport with their mates and they're building a passion for it. And then they can talk about what's happening at that elite level. And it all comes from the community that's built under a sport, under any sport that has that sort of elite level. And when you bring that sort of disrespect and the shame onto Cricket Australia, as everyone would have felt, like, I don't play cricket, but I was still so disappointed when Sandpaper Gate came to light, and when this came to light and all of those things that happened, especially as Australia, which is such a strong and passionate nation when it comes to supporting our national teams and our national athletes. it's like Cricket Australia, they just keep doing things that are going to keep disappointing the nation. I'm not sure when they think they'll stop. And I also hope at some point I'll be able to stop saying how disappointed I am in male sporting teams, like I have been the last couple of weeks with Collingwood and other organisations. But I think, and we've talked about it with the AFL, people really need to turn their eyes outward a little bit and actually look at how important the community they have and the culture they have in that sport is. There was an article titled "Culture Trumps Talent," and that phrase is going to stick with me for the rest of my life, because that is something that I would want to go into an organisation with as a keystone of how I'm building that, because culture should always trump talent. You can't have that sort of talent and elite athletic ability without support from a culture, a strong culture.
Professor, fascinating segue from Tim Costello's discussion. Here he's saying that for individuals, we're expecting the highest standards of probity and acting correctly, and yet a government can be in dereliction of its duty to children, and that's fine. And isn't extraordinary? If the focus is on the individuals, and governments can escape liability.
And if I can just go back to the point, look, I think someone's doing a hatchet. What Tim Payne has done is wrong. What Cricket Australia did handling it 4 years ago was wrong. Whether he should have been captain, I probably agree with Sarah. Probably not. He shouldn't have been included and shouldn't have done it. So they've made the rod. But it just seems to be a hatchet job on him at the moment. I don't see anything about Ben Stokes bashing people after getting pissed and going out on a night or anything like that.
Well, England's got their own dramas at the moment with the racism row as well.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. I'm looking for it on the thing. I can't see anything about that being highlighted anywhere. And, I just think wrong, exactly. The story has come out. Timing. Is there something else behind it? Do New South Wales... Look, New South Wales history.
My query would be, what do you have to do to breach the code of conduct?
Where did the captain come from? Who was captain before Payne? Steve Smith. Where did he come from? New South Wales.
Oh,
captain before Smith. The pup, right? New South Wales. Captain before the pup. War. New South Wales. Captain before War. Taylor, New South Wales. You go back to Kerry Packer. When Kerry Packer took away the chapels, they brought Bob Simpson out of retirement to captain Australia.
So are you saying this is a stitch-up to get a New South Welshman in as captain? That is one of the most inventive stitch-ups you'll ever see.
Why would you say that?
My query is this too. If this isn't a breach of the code of conduct, what do you have to do to breach that code of conduct? My word.
Just coming in on what you said there, Paul, that echoes the Sydney Colt who messaged me exactly the same thing. How do you actually breach Cricket Australia's code of conduct?
Steve Smith was a clean skin. The only thing he'd send a woman a photo of is his cricket bat. He was obsessed with cricket. I don't think the fact that he's a New South Welshman had anything to do with his appointment. He is a cricket fanatic to the point where his now wife said they spent a month in Abu Dhabi and all he did was watch cricket on TV and ordered room service. So not exactly Mills and Bourne. But he was a clean skin, as is Pat Cummins. So I don't think the fact they're from the same state matters if we're going to get the right person.
But Steve Smith was a clean skin.
In terms of personal probity and conduct, I mean, in terms of these type of incidents. Now, Sandpaper Gate, of course, was wrong. But this
you couldn't get a bigger controversy in cricket than tampering with a ball.
Well, speaking of balls, forgive me, but I think Tim Payne shouldn't have accepted the captaincy, and he even messaged this poor woman, we're both something, and it's Joe's surname, the England captain, we're both that if this comes out. He knew it was a skeleton in the closet, and he knew it would come out, and he put the hand up and said, I'll lead this country, the second most important job in the country, knowing that skeleton was in his closet.
Oh, I agree with you. I'm not saying he should have been captain, and it should have been dealt with 87. 4 years ago. Now, I don't know, the timing of it, Just seems it was dealt with 4 years ago. Certainly. Was the wrong decision made? Yeah, I agree. It was. But it has been around. And as the judge said, every cricket journalist knew about it.
Yeah.
It's timing to me, I don't know. I just question the timing of it.
The reason Shane Warne is allowed to comment, in my view, is he wasn't a captain, and that captains should be held to a higher regard. So we're not attacking him as an individual. We're attacking his entitlement to be the captain with this sort of conduct. So that's why Shane Warne can get up on the ivory tower.
Yeah,
Okay,
good.
And I agree with you. He shouldn't have taken the job.
All right, good point, Paul. Now, I'm going to ask each of the panel this question. He stood down as captain. Should he be able to play for Australia in the first Ashes test, Paul?
No, because the Barmy Army will have more songs than Elton John. You just can't have that happening. He can't play. No.
Sarah?
No, I believe he's broken a code of conduct that wasn't enforced 4 years ago, and letting him come back and play is just embarrassing. I wouldn't want that happening to our nation and to the image our nation wants to portray.
Kuda?
Well, I don't understand why he can't play. Like Cricket Australia's done nothing. So he's the one. What's he going to do? Suspend himself? I'm going to have the test match off. Cricket Australia should have done it 4 years ago. If they do it now, it's reactionary and it's like a different
Just don't pick him. Pick Carey, the next man up.
Why though?
Because he's disgraced himself, and it will be a distraction from the entire series, and the Barmy Army would go ballistic.
Sorry, so we're not going to pick him because it's going to be a distraction because of the crowd.
No, it's going to totally overshadow what should be a fine sporting event.
But that's totally different to suspending him for the actions that he did 4 years ago.
Not suspending him, just picking the next man up, who's Carey.
I think Cricket Australia will have to have a quiet conversation with him and have that discussion. That again, they haven't really prosecuted him or given him any side punishments. There's no real reason he shouldn't be able to play, but there is an ethical and that sort of reason, as Paul was saying, Barmy Army is going to go off and it will remove that sort of image from the game. I think it might be a situation where Cricket Australia either needs to have a quiet word and say, is it retirement? What are we doing here? What's the next step? Because it is a massive distraction from what is traditionally a gentleman's game, as they call it. But there's nothing they can really do.
Peter, right of response?
I think he plays. I can't believe we're going to say that you're not going to pick your best keeper because it's going to be a distraction to the team because you're going to have crowds singing at him.
He's not proven. He's just back from serious neck surgery. I don't think that he's good to go anyway.
Oh, that's a different conversation.
It is. I'm happy to have a side bet with you. He will not be in that team.
What are you going to put up, Paul? Half a dozen.
A six-pack of gravitas when I get them.
Half a dozen gravitas glories.
You have to wait a couple of years for them.
All right, Judge, your thoughts?
No, he doesn't play. Mainly for the reasons that Paul said, but also I don't think he qualifies on form. I think he's in the team, as Paul was saying, as a softener after the Sandpaper Gate scandal. That sort of clean skin attribute is now gone. I think he'll be dogged through the tour by negative publicity, particularly as his form, I just don't think he qualifies on form, and also support Sarah's point as well. But I fundamentally think he just, and this is the easy way for the ACB not to pick him on form.
Gilding?
I think Carey should be in because he's the best keeper batsman. Should have been in 2 years ago, especially over in England over there. Would throw up the name Inglis as a wicketkeeper from WA. A young up and coming and probably as good a keeper as Payne is. So should he be available and considered? Yes. Is he the best man available for the job? No. So there's some things here. But if Peter Neville, the New South Wales captain and keeper gets in, well.
Oh, Goulding,
come on.
Please. Goulding. But that's a different conversation to not picking him because it's going to overshadow.
You've been bashing New South Wales more than Dan Andrews today, Gil.
Sorry?
You've been bashing New South Wales more than Daniel Andrews today.
No, just stating the facts. I went through who was captain of Australia, and they've been New South Wales since Greg Chappell. Payne's the only one who hasn't been captain of Australia who hasn't been from New South Wales. That's a statement of fact, Paul.
Was he born there, Gelding?
Hey?
Was he born there? I'm just trying to look for a link.
Well, don't know how he got there. I don't know.
Professor, sorry, by the way, the best keeper in the world is a female, Sarah Taylor, the English keeper. Adam Gilchrist says she's actually the best keeper in the world, so perhaps we should be looking at a female keeper to play for Australia. That sounds silly, but if the best keeper is a female, get her in.
Yeah. All right, now, Gelding, in answer to your question about betting, my investigations reveal that Centrebet is the first online gambling organisation that was licensed in the Northern Territory in 1993 when Paul Keating's Labor Party was in power.
Right, and John Howard and Mr. Costello was treasurer
after that. Yeah.
But could have legislated against it?
Well, yeah, they could have, but all I'm saying is the horse was already out the gate by the time they got in.
Right.
They didn't bring it in. All right,
Okay.
Gelding, given we're talking about gambling, today's best bets for Kilmore and Swan Hill are?
Kilmore Cup Day, Professor. So in the Cup, we'll go race 7, number 5, Imperial Lad. But before then, we might try to build a bit of a bank in race 1, number 10, Starion. Into race 2, number 11, Nice for What. And race 6, number 9, Master Fontano. Quickly in Swan Hill, where Robbo has 5 rides today. I've mentioned a couple that'll be probably on our website where he might have a couple of good each way chances, but I like 3 there today. Race 3, number 11, Perfect Legacy. Race 4, number 1, Bogger Dreams. And race 6, number 3, Ortello.
And Gelding, thanks for the tips. And have you got any feedback for us on a certain run yesterday at Tatura?
Yes. A little horse I have a share in dropped the mic ran in the Tatura Cup yesterday. And as we said, it ran 3rd. So paid $2.20. So a small profit made out of it and all that. But I don't think we'll see Liam Reedon on the horse ever again. I think it was one of the a part owner from over the ditch in New Zealand wrote back and gave the ride the equivalent to what the professor sometimes does give, an S-hit ride.
An S-hit ride? Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, on to better things now. Probably packing them in 2 weeks. There's a $175,000 Vobis gold race there. It may be aimed at David, but I'll keep you informed of that.
And of course, Jamie Carr won her appeal at the Supreme Court, I believe, and is back next week.
Yes, she didn't appeal the 3-month suspension that she originally got. What she appealed was the extra 2 months the stewards put on to them, saying that she didn't fully explain to them who was there. She said she was asked the question who was there, and she gave that answer. Then it was found out another person had been there and gone. So the stewards added 2 months suspension on. That was the bit that was contested and was found that she answered the questions that was asked. So, yeah, interesting. So she's back riding Saturday at Caulfield.
Horses.
One final question, Paul. Foxy Fruiter yesterday. Were you on Foxy Fruiter?
No, I had it each way. So that was anyway. That.
So you were on it. You were on it.
Each way on a small investment. But I did want to say, Professor, your Dogs, massive news in rugby league, have added Villamay Kickow. You're getting more stars assembled there than at Hollywood Boulevard. So you've got quite a team to look forward to next year. there's not many Panthers left, I don't think, you haven't poached. So Phil Gould is obviously wielding his power there at the Dogs already. Poor old Villamite Kickow was pictured in a Dogs polo shirt. Might be like one you've got, Professor. And the problem for everyone, he's playing at the Panthers next year. So he's already in the Bulldogs polo shirt. So we have a crazy situation where he's expected to front up for another team. It happens in rugby league all the time, even at the coaching level. So that's a massive signing, literally, Professor. And your team, all you need is a hooker. And if you get our favourite police academy recruit, Reid Mahoney, you'll have quite a premiership force next year, Professor.
Paul, is Kickout really that big a signing on $800,000 a year that plays outside, runs at small blokes, and I don't think he stood up in a big game?
Oh, he's a very good talent. He's going to be a good signing, and with the players around him, he's going to be, I think, very damaging. But you'd worry whether he could be like a Fafita type, just appearing here and there, flat track bully. All you can do is get the best players in, and Phil Gould is certainly assembling some roster there behind the scenes. The Eels are in crisis, I've got to say that as well. And Wayne Bennett is plotting and scheming to get Kalen Ponga there to the Dolphins, along with everyone's favourite suspicious white powder provider, Brandon Smith. So he's likely to go there to the Seagulls. So Wayne Bennett's not quietly sitting in the off-season, not doing much, I can assure you.
And Sarah, we're still waiting on the AFLW draw to be put up. So hopefully
Yes,
we're closer. We're closer, surely.
I'm hoping so. There's a lot of speculation. We know when the first round's going to be, but we're not 100% sure on who's going to be playing, where they're going to be playing. We know the Saints aren't going to be able to play the first few games at RCA Park as they are currently fixing up the oval, so there's no grass for them to play on. So it looks like they'll be playing most of their home games towards the end of the season. Other than that, still waiting on confirmation from the AFL and the AFLW.
But we just wait with bated breath, Professor, don't we? We really do.
David, do you think they'll announce it a week before the first game?
Probably. That's what they do in local women's footy competitions as well. Just wait until the last second, and then you've got to move your whole life around it.
Unbelievable.
It'd be the roving fixture.
It should just be up there as a highlight for the footy season, and they can't get that one right. And the same as the cricket. Why can't the Big Bash women's, as you said, it's the last game, why can't that be played the same time as the men's? You know, at the same ground, on the same wicket. I don't know.
There's a push, Gilding, to get all games played in New South Wales, I've heard.
Now, Judge,
well, wait on, Paul. Haven't you got the Prime Minister of New South Wales?
Oh,
don't they get
the Sharks'
anything?
favourite fan, yeah, he's not from Cronulla. Yeah, that one.
Was John Howard Prime Minister for New South Wales? Yeah.
Gelding, they couldn't play Sporting New South Wales cricket all the time because we know it pisses with the rain every second day.
Well, Victoria played New South Wales now 3 times in a row. Is there any chance of them playing someone else?
We just
you're going to say?
Yeah, Judge, just to finish the show, you're on Zing account. How many zingers were there today?
Only 7 today from Paul. He said his record last week was 17. Clearly decided to rest on his laurels, and I think the listening audience is the poorer for it, to be honest.
I've gone drier than Gandhi sandals.
Yeah. He's had a hard Saturday.
All right.
He's had a hard Saturday after backing Foxy Freda.
More about that later. All right, lady and gentlemen, thanks very much for today. A terrific